The helicopter bringing the astronauts back to the Essex settled softly on the deck of the carrier and was welcomed by hundreds of sailors. The sign welcoming them left an N out of Don Isley's name. As is customary, a red carpet was rolled out for them.
The astronauts there in the door. Walter Schirra on the left, Don Isley there, and Walt Cunningham. They're in their NASA flight suits. The suits are wet, showing some evidence of the rain shower which has been going on outside. The band is playing now. Anchors away. All three men have 11-day beards, as we told you before. Their hair is wet. They're walking along the red carpet now.
And they all look in exceedingly good shape. They're all smiling, laughing. There's some grasping of hands and grasping of shoulders, and I'm sure some apologies for the weather in which they've arrived. There are going to be no speeches here on the flight deck, it appears. NASA people are already anxiously clapping their hands and saying, let's speed it up, let's get going. And Dr. Donald Stulkin, the landing recovery team leader, gives the astronauts a slight shove, and off they go onto the elevator there.
Space officials got the men to sick bay quickly, and examinations showed they were in fine condition. All had caught colds aloft, and on re-entry they came down with helmets off. Their idea was to hold their noses and blow to prevent injury to their eardrums. The capsule, with its balloon still holding it upright, was brought to the Essex. The astronauts left sick bay long enough to receive a telephone call from the president.
We salute the three of you, as well as the thousands of your space team headed by Mr. Webb and others, in great admiration and affection. And when you have finished your debriefings, Ms. Johnson, I hope to receive you where we can talk about your experiences without having to go through the Houston switchboard. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
The astronauts will be flown tomorrow morning from the aircraft carrier Essex to Cape Kennedy, and NBC News will cover their return. At the Cape, they'll begin a long series of briefings, which will be continued when they return to Houston on Friday.
The Huntley-Brinkley Report is produced by NBC News and brought to you in color by Dristan tablets. Dristan gives more complete relief, works fast to relieve colds, congestion, headache, body aches, and fever. Get Dristan.
When a virus cold hits you, your world can't stop. To keep going, you take aspirin for headache, an antihistamine for runny nose, and a decongestant for stuffiness. But not all three of these medications are concentrated in Dristan tablets. So when you can't stop, Dristan helps keep you going.
Honey, I don't know how you do it. And with a virus cold.
Oh, I feel all right now.
Do everything you can do for relief of virus cold miseries. And take Dristan tablets.
What's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this? Want to get out of that mess quick and easy? Use Easy Off. It has 25% more power cleaner than other leading sprays. This extra power removes the heaviest grease. You just wipe it off. Works best in warm ovens or in cold ovens. Easy Off with 25% more power cleaner. Makes life easy for nice girls like you.
Communist gunners today fired across the demilitarized zone and heavily shelled the village of Dong Ha and a nearby U.S. Marine headquarters. One shell hit the Dong Ha Children's Hospital, killing 3 Marines and 3 South Vietnamese and wounding 27. South Vietnamese President Thieu said today he does not oppose a halt in American bombing of North Vietnam when there is good reason to believe Hanoi would join in a de-escalation of the war. David?
The American and North Vietnamese negotiators meet again tomorrow in Paris, and there are rumors that some sort of break may soon appear. And the White House said President Johnson would have a televised press conference, as he rarely does, sometime this week, the exact time not yet announced. The Foreign Minister of France, Michel Debré, said the United States was making what he called courageous moves toward peace, and he said they were beginning to get results. And the war itself, in the meantime, is in a lull, And while there has been no publicly announced ceasefire, the level of the fighting is reduced. And officials in Washington decline to give any information one way or another, though it looks now more than any other time lately as if something may be about to happen. Chet?
Japanese students and riot police fought last night in the streets of Tokyo. The violence followed a day of student demonstrations against the United States and against their own government's support of the American effort in Vietnam. NBC News correspondent John Rich reports.
They called it Anti-War Unified Action Day, and Japanese students and laborers came out to show how much they hate violence. It ended in one of the worst riots the city of Tokyo has seen since the war. As usual, the militant leftist Zengakuren students led the assault. They had prepared carefully on their campuses for what they knew was coming. After speech-making against the war in Vietnam, they headed out into the streets, one unit going to the Japanese Diet Building. Tough riot police blocked their way, and the battle began. Another target was the headquarters of the Japan Self-Defense Force. Here, water cannon had been set up, and when the students stormed the gate, the cannon opened up. There were similar scenes in other Japanese cities. Finally, all the student groups converged on Shinjuku, one of Tokyo's biggest railroad stations. Tank cars passed through here hauling jet fuel to U.S. military air bases. The schoolboys smashed into the station and occupied it, despite the strong forces of police on hand. The rail traffic had been halted many hours before. Watching all this on television, shocked city officials invoked, for the first time in 16 years, the tough anti-riot law, which provides prison terms at hard labor for rioters for from 6 months to 10 years. Japanese leftists are building up to a big offensive in 1970 when the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty comes up for review. Each time, their demonstrations have become better organized and more violent. John Rich, NBC News, Tokyo.
This is a molecular model of poly-1,4-cyclohexylene dimethylene terephthalate. How about that? And I'm Joanna Barnes here to tell you what this unique molecule of Codel polyester fiber means in carpets. It's so special, it's patented.
Every room in your house comes alive because carpets of Codel bounce back beautifully. Even a house full of kids can't keep Codel fiber down. That's why Codel is the fastest growing carpet fiber.
If you can't remember the name Codel, ask for poly-1,4-cyclohexylene dimethylene terephthalate.
We also make 2,2,4-trimethyl-1,3-pentane diol monoisobutyrate.
But that doesn't go in carpets.
Codel fiber has bounced back.
Count on Codel, a member of the Eastman Kodak family.
The newest Gallup poll shows Vice President Humphrey gaining on Richard Nixon. The poll gives Nixon 43% of the vote to 31 for Humphrey, but in the poll of September 27th, Humphrey was 2 percentage points lower and Nixon 1 higher. George Wallace's support remains unchanged at 20%. Another poll, the Sindlinger poll, reported a gain of more than 3% for Humphrey between October 8th and today. The vice president increased to 31%, while Nixon's percentage remained the same at 38.1. Wallace showed a sharp drop to 10.4%. Nixon campaigned today in Ohio, and it was one of the most hectic days he has spent during the campaign. He went back to the old-fashioned whistle-stop train tour. It repeated a trip Nixon took in 1960. NBC News correspondent Herbert Kaplow reports.
Nixon campaigned by train today along much the same route he traveled once in 1960. Accompanied by local Republican officials and his family, he moved through Ohio today aboard a train named the Nixon Victory Special. The state is both heavily agricultural and industrial, and with 26 electoral votes is one of the largest blocks in the election. In 1960, the only big states Nixon won were Ohio and California. He started off in Cincinnati this morning. His messages continue to be mostly general in content. In Springfield, as elsewhere today, Nixon conveyed the impression that while he will visit more communities now and hit a bit harder at Humphrey, he'll continue with the basic theme that brought him this far, the need for a change.
This nation for 4 years has been passing through a great darkness in the American spirit, and we have an opportunity on November the 5th. Each of you can play a role, and that role is this. That role is to let in the sun and remove the darkness so that Americans can bring a new dawn to the cause of peace and freedom all over the world. Let's win this one, not just for ourselves. Let's win it for America and for those who want peace and freedom in the world. Let's go.
The train then moved on from Springfield to cover almost 250 miles and 9 Ohio cities. Nixon's tour through Ohio today is the start of the final 2 weeks, during which time he'll concentrate on the big states. He thinks he's in pretty good shape generally in these areas, but wants to make sure. Herbert Kaplow, NBC News, with the Nixon campaign in Ohio.
Tonight, Nixon made another of his nationwide radio broadcasts, and in this one he called Humphrey's promise to raise Social Security benefits by 50% a deceptive promise which could only add to inflation. The vice president was in Texas, and this time he got more cooperation from party leaders. Governor Conley and Senator Yarborough met him at the Fort Worth airport and had encouraging words for him. In Oshkosh, Wisconsin, George Wallace again was heckled mercilessly, and in addition, students threw things at him. He was hit on the shoulder by an apple core. David?
The Congress, now adjourned, passed a gun control law stronger than any in 30 years, but still weaker than the president and many others wanted. President Johnson signed it into law today, saying it was not good enough, but perhaps better than nothing.
I ask for the national registration of all guns and the licenses of those who carry those guns. For the fact of life is that there are over 160 million guns in this country. More firearms than families. And if guns are to be kept out of the hands of the criminal, and out of the hands of the insane, and out of the hands of the irresponsible, then we just must have licensing. If the criminal with a gun is to be tracked down quickly, then we must have registration in this country. The voices that blocked these safeguards were not the voices of an aroused nation. They were the voices of a powerful lobby, a gun lobby, that has prevailed for the moment in an election year. We have been through a great deal of anguish these last few months and these last few years. Too much anguish to forget so quickly. So now we must complete the task which this long-needed legislation begins. We have come a long way. We have made much progress, but not near enough.
The new law stops the mail-order sales of pistols, rifles, shotguns, and ammunition, puts some restrictions on who can buy them over the counter. But some of the restrictions will be hard to enforce, such as sales to the mentally disturbed, since mental disturbances sometimes don't appear until after the shots are fired.
Now, the fastest relief known for bronchial asthma attacks can restore free breathing in as little as 15 seconds. It's new Primatene Mist. Used as directed, Primatene Mist instantly delivers medication deep into congested lungs, opens breathing passages, relaxes bronchial spasms. So asthma attack is relieved fast. Get new Primatene Mist. Restores free breathing in as little as 15 seconds.
The Huntley Brinkley Report continues. Brought to you by
Borden. You'll find our new trademark on over 7,000 different products, and everyone's got to be good.
One thing Americans discover when they travel in Switzerland is Swiss-style yogurt. It's so good tasting, the Swiss eat 32 times as much yogurt as Americans do. 32 times as much. Now this delicious new yogurt is made in America by Borden's with real fruit all the way through. Try Borden's Swiss-style yogurt. But watch out. You may find yourself eating 32 times as much, even in America.
About 7 million Negroes are eligible to vote in the presidential election this year. 4 years ago, less than 6% of them voted for Goldwater, and it appears this year Nixon will do a little better, but not a great deal. While most Negroes say they will vote Democratic, their political attitudes seem to be changing. Here's a report from contributing editor John Chancellor.
White and Negro voters in this election are separated by a sort of segregation of belief. Negroes see domestic issues from the underside of the ghetto. To them, law and order means a breakdown in police discipline and a slowdown in civil rights. A majority of the white voters don't see it that way, which increases the Negro voter's sense of isolation. Those Negroes who do vote will do so without passion, and most of them will vote Democratic out of habit, not enthusiasm. Also, Negroes are getting tired of being considered a block vote manipulated by white politicians. The new thing is to vote for black candidates for black control of slums. This could, before long, break up the old relationship between the Negro vote and the Democratic Party and set up some new Negro voting patterns. One of the most articulate new Negroes in the country is a man named Lou Smith, who was a black activist in Watts in Los Angeles. Lou Smith does not speak for all Negroes, but what he says is essential to an understanding of the present mood of the Negro voter.
We got three men running this time. Nixon just isn't saying much of anything, that the community can even understand, more or less relate to. Wallace is on the outside barking, well, we're used to Wallace's type. Every black man knows a Wallace. But, we kind of respect him, incidentally, too, because at least he's honest. And then Humphrey isn't saying anything. He just holds nothing that excites the black community. I think a lot of that also has to do with the way black community is made up. It still is a community that deals from its gut more than its head. And Humphrey hasn't inspired it at all. He doesn't seem to have what you guess in your language would call the charisma. In this community we would call it soul. He doesn't have a way of firing people up. And I think there's also some fear of what's going to happen to us after this election, which is basic underneath of it. See, I wonder, if no matter which of the three candidates win, as far as I'm concerned, the black community has had it. It's going to pay some dues at the end of this election. And there'll be compromises made with Humphrey in the middle to Wallace on the right. And all of those mean some form of disaster for the black community. It depends on how big the compromises are, how big the disaster will be. And I just feel like this is white America's chance to kind of show at the polls just how she feels about black people struggling for their freedom in the country.
Mr. Smith, you get around this neighborhood a lot. Would you tell me what the mood of the people is here in Watts now?
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, their political heroes are gone. They weren't really the Malcolm worshipers, they worshipped King. And we killed him and we killed Malcolm, so we've killed all the leaders of the black community. And when being kind of realist underneath of all the rest of the stuff, we knew we had to have white presidents because the country's not ready for black presidents. Their presidential candidate was Kennedy, and he was killed. And then with all the talk that's coming out of the candidates now, I think really it's just a mood of apprehension. We feel the jury is out. We're going to be judged, and something's going to happen. Something's going to happen to this black community no matter who gets in. Now, and I kind of look at it another way too here. Same way, but a different analogy would be this. We have Humphrey, who is running, talking about if you little colored people or Negroes would act like white people, I may be able to give you a bigger crumb off the table. To the Wallaces and the Nixons who are kind of talking about, well, we just want to kind of repress you all because, after all, it is a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant nation, and its value system is built on that. And if you guys would just stay down there in the house of your choice down there and work in a job of your choice, as long as you don't talk about plant management or plant ownership or talking about getting too high up in the industry, then we will tolerate you. And what we're kind of saying is that we're waiting to see, you know, what you all going to do to us, because we are not going to stop moving on you, in the sense that we're not going to stop fighting for black dignity, black pride, black industry, black communities. We're not going to stifle our kids again by telling them, now you got to be nice to white folks and scratch your head and shuffle your feet and you may get somewhere. We know we can't do that. And I kind of feel like it's, well, you know, we're about to have had it. The question is, you know, how much will we get it?
Why are they voting Democratic, given what you've said? Is that just habit? Is that all it is?
Yeah, if there's any Democratic voters, it's primarily because of Wallace and Nixon have made no efforts whatsoever to even give lip service to the black community. And we're not suicidal. You know, we don't just run out voting for somebody because they say, I hate you. I've seen a lot of that come out of the white liberal community where they holler, beat me, beat me, beat me more, you know, and I like you better. No, we're not in that kind of bag. And I think it'll be a combination of probably voting for the memory of Kennedy, voting Democratic because at least they have given the lip service in the past few years. But I think you also see a very strong trend to, not in any organized way. Some people are just not going to think it's worthwhile even going to the polls. And I think, like in the Goldwater-Johnson election, the black community poured out in mass. And in unprecedented, you know, statistics, went for Johnson against Goldwater. Because, you know, Johnson was saying something then. We didn't know how he would turn out, but he was saying something. And Goldwater was really saying something that we just couldn't stomach. At this point, you know, none of them are saying anything to make us rush out against the other. And it would seem logical, you know, that the black community would pour out to defeat Wallace. And I think that can just kind of sum up where I am. You know, as bad as Wallace looks to us, Humphrey doesn't look that much better.
Life's more interesting when there's a white owl around, like the handsome White Owl New Yorker. A blend of choice tobacco gives the New Yorker a mild, full flavor that lifts a man's spirits. Of the New Yorker, the cigar that makes life more interesting.
You get a lot more from a white owl than just smoke.
Deposed Panamanian President Arias arrived in Washington today and took up residence in his country's embassy. He vowed to stay there until he is returned to power. Panama itself is generally quiet, kept that way by National Guardsmen and an apparent lack of outrage over the ouster of Arias. Guardsmen make a few arrests every day, arrests of people thought to be trying to create a general strike in Panama City against the provisional regime of Colonel Jose Pinilla. One technique has been to throw glass and tacks on the streets. The guardsmen simply arrest the people they believe responsible, then sweep the streets clear. United Nations General Assembly President Arenaris Catalan today had a brain tumor removed. He is expected to recover within a few weeks. Israeli and Jordanian gunners exchanged artillery fire across the Jordan River south of the Sea of Galilee. No casualties were reported. Sirhan, the accused assassin of Robert Kennedy, today heard a California judge refuse to suppress his private diaries as evidence. They allegedly contain an admission that Sirhan intended to kill Kennedy. Prices fell today on the New York Stock Exchange. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 4 1/3 points, and the value of an average share of common stock decreased 17 cents. David?
Most members of Congress mail out every month or so what they call newsletters and send them to voters and constituents in their home states by the thousands. Under the law, they could be mail free so long as they qualify as official business and not political propaganda. But, needless to say, those terms are loosely interpreted. One politician's official business is another politician's propaganda. Senator Robert Griffin of Michigan is the Republican who led the fight against President Johnson's court nominee, Abe Fortas, and won. Well, he mails out a newsletter. But now, since he helped defeat Fortas and the president, the post office has suddenly decided a newsletter he mailed out 2 years ago was not official business, but politics. And it has sent him a bill for $25,000. He says it's political harassment, and he won't pay it. Good night, Chet.
Good night, David, and good night for NBC News.
We've taken the cover off of